Okay, perfect.
Perfect.
Well, thank you everyone for having me, and thanks for your patience. The technical difficulties were all on my part. Ironically, my laptop was just not wanting to work for us today. But we've got it sorted. I'm calling in from my phone and they're very generously sharing my slides for me. So my name is Amy Kreykes. I'm a family medicine, sports medicine, aerospace medicine doc. And today I'm going to talk to you about sort of my training path to get to becoming an aerospace medicine physician and my current role at NASA. Next slide, please. So just a disclaimer, any opinions that I share with you in this lecture are 100% my opinions. They are not the opinions of the University of Texas Medical Branch, KBR, or NASA. Okay, next. So my training and clinical background, I got an MD from the University of Colorado School of Medicine, which is in my home state. And then I did a family medicine residency at the University of Michigan, go blue. And then I did a primary care sports medicine fellowship also at the University of Michigan. And the reason that I did that, there were multiple reasons that I did that. First of all, I really felt strongly that to be the best family medicine physician that I could be, I wanted to pursue a fellowship in sports medicine, because about 70% of complaints that come into a primary care office are actually musculoskeletal. So I thought that that made a lot of sense to be a better family medicine doc. But I also knew that sports medicine and injuries and things like that are very common in the aerospace medicine patient population as well. And I had my eyes on aerospace medicine since actually before I started my residency in family medicine. I should back up just a little tiny bit. When I was interviewing for residencies, I knew I wanted to do aerospace medicine, but I knew I also really wanted to do family medicine. And there is a combined internal medicine, aerospace medicine program at the University of Texas Medical Branch. But I didn't really think I wanted to do internal medicine. I really thought I wanted to do some peds. And so I was kind of on the fence about like, oh man, like, what do I do, you know? And I actually reached out to some of the residents at UTMB at the time and said, what should I do? You know, do I need to do a combined internal medicine, aerospace medicine residency? Do I need to be an emergency medicine doctor? I noticed a lot of people that went into aerospace medicine at the time were emergency medicine. And I said, I really feel like my calling is family medicine. And at that time, I got some of the best advice that I've ever received from one of the UTMB residents. It was Jen Law at the time. She wrote back and said, the most important thing is for you to be the best doctor that you can be before you become anything else, right? So before you become an aerospace medicine doctor, before you become board certified in anything, you just need to be the best doctor you can be. And if that means that you're passionate about family medicine, then go be a family medicine doctor, right? Like, don't do something that you're not passionate about just because you think it's going to get you where you want to be in the long run, right? Because residency is hard. And well, she didn't say this part, this is all me monologuing now, but residency is really hard, right? and the career is hard as well. So you really don't want to pick something that you don't like, just hoping that it's going to get you somewhere else later on, because first of all, what if it doesn't? You know, what if I had done internal medicine or emergency medicine or something like that, and then I didn't go on to do aerospace medicine? But secondly, because it's a lot of years that you're putting in the meantime, trying to get to where you want to be. So do something that you love and do something that you're passionate about. And I think that that's really important advice, and that's advice that's gotten me a really long way in my life. I've always sort of remembered her telling me that, and anytime I've been at a juncture in my career where I've thought, okay, what next? I've always said, I want to do something that I love. So I did family medicine, and then I loved sports medicine, and I thought it was going to make me a better family medicine doctor, and I thought that it would be applicable to aerospace medicine. But that was hard, right? Because I was saying, well, I'm going to put off my goals of my aerospace medicine career to do an additional fellowship. But I loved it, you know, and I knew I really wanted to do that. And so that's something that I did. So then after my primary care sports medicine fellowship, I worked for a couple of years. That was another hard decision. I was like, oh man, you know, like I'm not getting any younger. I just want to keep plowing straight through and apply for the aerospace medicine residency. But but you also have to have life too, you know? And I wanted to get married, and it's a long, complicated story, but my husband's actually from New Zealand, and he needed to get a green card. And like, there were things that needed to happen before I could just go start another fellowship. So, so I took a couple years off of training and I worked. So I worked on a Navajo reservation in rural Northwest New Mexico, which was incredibly rewarding and really eye-opening and great clinical experience. I would highly, highly recommend working on a reservation to anyone. It's really great. And then I got married, and my husband and I moved to New Zealand for a little while we were waiting for his green card to get approved. So I worked in New Zealand for about 6 months. And then I got accepted to the Aerospace Medicine Residency at the University of Texas Medical Branch, which is a little bit of a misnomer. It's a residency because that's the way it's qualified with ACGME, because as I told you earlier, it's a combined residency in internal medicine and aerospace medicine. So there's 2 different ways that you can do it. You can match, and if you match, you know, out of medical school, just like you would for anything else. And it's combined. So it's internal medicine and aerospace medicine, and you're matching for both of them at the same time. And internal medicine is usually 3 years, and aerospace medicine is usually 2 years. But if you do the combined program, the internal medicine gets condensed to 2 years. So you do 2 years of internal medicine, and then you do 2 years of aerospace medicine after it. And that's what I told you I didn't do because I wanted to do family medicine. So the other option is, if you've already completed a residency and you're coming in having finished that, you can, for all intents and purposes, it's basically a fellowship, right? You match, you don't match, it's outside the match, you just go interview like any normal job. And which is very refreshing after the match, which is the weirdest way in the world to get a job, right? You just go interview, and if you're accepted, then you say yes, and I'll take the job. And then you just do the 2 years of aerospace medicine. So that's more like a fellowship, but it's still considered a residency since it has that combined component. So I went and did the 2-year aerospace medicine residency at the University of Texas Medical Branch. And aerospace medicine residencies include either a Master of Public Health or a Master of Science, like a condensed master's degree. Because to become board certified in aerospace medicine, you have to take a minimum of 15 credits in a bunch of courses that are almost enough to get you an MPH. So most programs have you just complete the MPH as well. So like biostatistics and epidemiology and public health and things like that. So, so my MPH was done at the University of Texas Medical Branch during my residency. And then I finished that last July, and I've been working since then. So next slide. So we'll talk a little bit about residency. So when Shayna asked me to give this presentation, she said, you know, it would be great if you could just tell us about the typical day in the life of an aerospace medicine resident. And I've been thinking about that a lot in anticipation for this presentation today. And I can't tell you about the typical life in the day of an aerospace medicine resident because it's so atypical. There's not, you know, a family medicine residency is pretty, you know, you're on your hospital rotation, or you're on your OBGYN rotation, or you're on your pediatric rotation, and you get up in the morning and you come home at night and you work probably way too many hours. And that's like the day in the life of a family medicine resident. Sports medicine fellowship, you go to your clinics, you go to your training rooms, you take care of your athletes, you go home. I can give you typical ideas of what those are like. It's really hard to give you a typical aerospace medicine resident day because it's so varied, but having it be so varied is, I think, what's so amazing about it. So we already talked about you do a consolidated Master's of Public Health. So it's consolidated into about 9 months. So that, it's busy. You're in classes again, which for me was weird. Here I am, like this 30-something-year-old person sitting in this classroom with a whole bunch of 20-somethings who are like straight out of college. And I haven't been in an academic classroom setting all day, every day, or most of the time during my days, since I was in college. And so that was an interesting transition in life to go back to being essentially a grad student again. But I really enjoyed it. And being a grad student does have some nice flexibility. You know, you don't have class all day, every day. You have class and you have a little break to work on your stuff, and you have class and you have a little break. And so it's kind of nice to, you know, have time during the day to go to the post office and dentist and, you know, do things that never happened during residency and fellowship because you were working all day. And so, but I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the work. I found it really interesting and really challenging. There's a lot of group work in public health because public health is all about collaboration. You do a thesis, so you know, there's a lot to be done, but it was definitely very rewarding, and I'm really proud of having an MPH. And I think that it's very applicable to the field of aerospace medicine because it's preventive medicine. And having that public health background now and having the mentality of everything I learned from my MPH has really helped me. So in addition to that, you have your clinical rotations, and that's where things really start to get atypical. This is why I can't give you just a straightforward answer to what a day in the life of an aerospace medicine resident is like, because it really depends. It really depends on what rotation you're on. And a lot of rotations are away rotations because you're doing such amazing and unique and incredible things that they don't all happen right there at your institution, because no institution could offer all of those amazing and incredible opportunities. So examples of amazing and incredible opportunities in aerospace medicine. So we rotate with the Federal Aviation Administration. We go out to Oklahoma City to where CAMI is, that's the Civil Aerospace Medicine Institute. And we work with them, certifying pilots to fly. And we get to see all of the amazing things that they have there and experience all the amazing things they have there. So I did the water survival training course there. And you get to get in their simulators and see what spatial disorientation is actually like. And you get to get in there. They have a fuselage of an aircraft outside that they fill up with fog and fog to simulate smoke. And, you know, they block the exits and they, you know, make people evacuate, and they're constantly trying to learn more and make things better for federal aviation. And it's an amazing, amazing institution. So we rotate with them. We obviously rotate with NASA, all through NASA. So, and when I say we, I'm talking about the University of Texas Medical Branch. There are other aerospace medicine training programs in the country, and many of them have similar experiences, but I can really only tell you about my experience. So that's what I'm telling you about today. So obviously we rotate with NASA. So we rotate at the Neutral Buoyancy Lab, which is the gigantic swimming pool that has mock-up pieces of the International Space Station sunk in it, that the astronauts train for their extravehicular activities in. So, you know, we work there and we see the astronauts before and after their runs and do their medical exams for that. And we do the medical exams for all the scuba divers that help support that. And we, you know, if somebody, heaven forbid, but if somebody needed to get in the hyperbaric chamber because they're having symptoms of the bends or something like that, decompression sickness, we would be right there helping with that. And we get to get in the hyperbaric chamber and we get to get in the altitude chamber. And we rotate through the occupational medicine clinic, and we rotate through the flight medicine clinic where the astronauts are seen. And we rotate through medical operations. So we, you know, go sit in mission control with the doctor, you know, and have an earpiece in, listening to what's going on the International Space Station. And then now the world is becoming this amazing place of commercial space entities as well. And so now there are opportunities for residents to rotate with SpaceX and with Virgin Galactic. And I think that those opportunities are just going to keep opening up because there's more and more commercial entities. And I think that residents are just going to continue to have more and more opportunities with more and more of those commercial entities in the future. So yeah, I mean, there's just so many incredible experiences. Oh, another incredible experience. This is probably one of my favorite rotations in residency. we rotate with the military. So we went out to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio for like 2.5 months. And we actually do the Air Force flight surgeon training flow. So we take all the same classes that the Air Force flight surgeon classes take. And at the end, when the Air Force flight surgeons get their wings, we get Air Force wings as well. And I actually grew up in an Air Force family. I have a dad who's a retired F-16 pilot, and I have a brother who's a KC-10 captain right now. And I don't know, that was just an incredible, amazing, and humbling moment to get those wings, you know? And my dad was like, oh my gosh, there's 3 people in the family with wings now. And it was just, I don't know, that was just incredible. And working with the Air Force was a wonderful experience. And it was just amazing. And there was so much learning, and they have awesome experiences that you do with myself. So we get to get in the centrifuge, and we get to see all of their like crash testing devices, and we get to fly. So when we were rotating with the Air Force, we had, I don't know, like 4 or 5 flights, and ours was actually condensed. It's usually more than that. But because of coronavirus, things were adapted a little bit for us. But you get to actually get up in the air and fly, which is huge, right? Aerospace medicine is preventive medicine, but it's also occupational medicine. And the very best way to take care of your patient is to know what your patient is experiencing and going through. And I just think that's incredible that the Air Force puts all their flight surgeons up in aircraft and has them fly, so they have a better appreciation, a better understanding for what their pilots are experiencing. And we got to get in the simulators. And it was just amazing. That was one of the greatest rotations ever. So hopefully I've conveyed that there's really not, a typical day in the life of an aerospace medicine, because one day you're in a centrifuge and the next day you're scuba diving in the neutral buoyancy lab. And okay, not literally the next day, but there's some space in between. But you're doing all of these incredible and amazing things, and then you're getting your MPH, and you're working in a clinic, and it's so varied and so rich. It's just amazing. So my last bullet point is, it's the coolest residency in the world, and it's the 3rd one I've done. so I feel like I'm probably okay in saying that. Now, that's nothing against the University of Michigan. I absolutely loved my family medicine residency, and I loved my sports medicine residency, but it's just kind of hard to compete with the opportunities that you have in an aerospace medicine residency. So yeah, that's the typical, atypical aerospace medicine experience, I guess I would say. So next slide, please. All right, so Shayna also asked me to talk to you guys a little bit about, it's from training to NASA. So what I do now at NASA. So my current position, I should probably say current positions at NASA. I am employed by the University of Texas Medical Branch, and then I am contracted to KBR. And then I'm contracted from KBR to NASA. It's a little bit like Inception. It's a contract within a contract within a contract. But I work for NASA, but I'm employed directly by UTMB. And so my paychecks come from UTMB, and my benefits come from UTMB, and so on and so forth. But for NASA, I have several different roles. So I work for something called the Exploration Medical Capability Element, XMC. And the bulk of the work that we're doing right now with XMC is for something called IMPACT. So IMPACT is not an acronym. So I can't tell you what IMPACT stands for because it doesn't stand for anything. But IMPACT is essentially a tool design, like a software design suite that is being designed as a trade space analysis tool. So, but it's more than that. It's incorporating a new medical system so that hopefully for future exploration missions, we will have a medical system where a crew member could go and talk to the system and say, hey, you know, like I'm having a headache or whatever. And the medical system would be like recording all of this, right? It would be like the most perfect scribe you could possibly imagine from a clinical standpoint. So the medical system would be recording all of this. And then the medical system would have a way of having the crew members sort of triage themselves and say, you know, okay, all right, well, here's follow-up questions about your headache. You know, let's learn a little bit more about this. And then based on what the crew member says, then, you know, if ground support needed to be included, it could be, but if not, the crew member could autonomously help treat themselves, right? So they could go through these algorithms and they could say, oh yeah, okay, you know, I'll take some ibuprofen or I'll take some Tylenol, or, oh, you know, like maybe this is decompression sickness. We probably need to get the ground involved or whatever the case may be. But it would be recording all of that, and it would be like taking the crew members' vital signs, and it would be recording all of that, and it would be recording the medication that's dispensed, and it would be recording, you know, that the medication's taken, and then it would be recording whether there were any side effects and how it worked. And it would, you know, just think about your ideal medical system. That's part of what Impact is designing. The other part of what Impact's designing, which is more what I'm involved in, is this trade space analysis tool. And so what that means is basically they are designing, so previously NASA had one called IMM, which was the Integrated Medical Model. And that's been used for over a decade for the International Space Station. And now we're coming up with the successor for that, because the International Space Station model is specific to the International Space Station, right? To low Earth orbit, to frequent resupply, to the lengths of missions that are there, to the amount of volume that you have to store all the stuff, right? The International Space Station is huge. It's like the size of a football field. It's like a 5-bedroom home. So you can imagine your medicine cabinet in a 5-bedroom home is big, right? But your medicine cabinet in an Orion capsule is going to be really tiny. So they're designing this trade space analysis suite that basically would say, okay, let's say we had a crew member and our crew member got, I don't know, appendicitis. If they got appendicitis on the mission, so first of all, what's the likelihood that they would get appendicitis on this mission? Secondly, if they did get appendicitis on the mission, what would we do, right? Like, how would we treat that? What resources would we need? And so on and so forth. And then what would be the likelihood of outcomes, right? Like if they had appendicitis, what's the likelihood that it's like a mild appendicitis versus like an abscessed appendicitis? Or what's the likelihood that we would have to evacuate them? Or heaven forbid, what's the likelihood that someone would die, right? So they're designing this software suite to help us come up with the answers to those questions. Because how else do you get the answers to those questions, right? There's no data from people having, you know, appendicitis in spaceflight. And so it's this huge effort to build this massive, robust data system to answer those questions, but then to also say, okay, well, now that we think we have a good idea of what the risk is that they might get appendicitis versus a cold versus a stubbed toe versus, you know, a fracture versus whatever, right? Now that we think we have a grasp of what those likelihoods are, what should we pack, right? That's the real like bottom line question that everyone at NASA wants to answer. What should we pack? And so we're trying to help answer all of those questions. So that's the quick and dirty about Impact. Then for, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. Then for medical operations, I work in sort of I have three sort of different hats. I work for the for the Human System Risk Board, the HSRB. And I'm NASA's operational bone risk custodian. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. I also work for musculoskeletal medicine and rehabilitation, since I'm a sports medicine doc. And I'll tell you more about that in a minute too. And then I work on something called the Artemis Health Measures Project. And I'll tell you more about that in a minute too. So next slide. Okay, this is our first test on the embedded video. Let's see what happens. I don't think we have sound. And I think you might be muted. Here. Okay. Oh, I still can't hear the video, Melissa. Pause it for a second. in a previous Zoom lecture that I was in with Shayna,
Oh.
there is a special way to unmute the video, but I don't remember how.
Okay.
Which isn't very helpful, is it?
It's when you share your screen, there's an option to enable sound.
Oh, Lord. Okay.
So maybe unshare and share again.
Yeah.
Thank you to our audience participants.
We will pause share for a second. And
I had to make it difficult with embedded videos, didn't I? Sorry.
share sound. All right. Let's try that.
Here we go. That's perfect.
We are about to explore deep space in a way that we haven't since Apollo. When you go to an emergency room because you're sick or injured, they're going to do blood tests and urine tests and x-rays. They're going to be able to put IVs in and give you medications. A lot of these technologies, we don't regularly use them in space. So we have to take these same technologies, make them better, adapt them, make them smaller, and then make sure that they work in this dangerous space environment. We're now trying to do something which we haven't really done before, and that is design the system from the ground up. In the past, we've always had a small medical kit, and over time, little pieces would be added in, but we've never stopped and said, what do we truly need to take? When you're trying to go far away from Earth, you can't take very much stuff with you. So you need to make sure that you're taking the right stuff. Designing the system from the beginning and then incorporating it fully into the vehicle. So it's going to be part of the spacecraft to keep our astronauts healthy and then bring them home again.
So that was just, you can stay on that slide, but that was just a video from, that's our element scientist, Chris Lanehart, who I work with at NASA. That's just a video of sort of previewing a little bit of XMC. So whenever people ask me what XMC does, I told you a little bit more specifically about impact in the projects that I'm working on, but whenever somebody asks me what XMC does at NASA, I say, okay, they are trying to answer the questions of what are the problems that are going to prevent humans from being able to do exploration missions? So that's question one. And then what are the solutions to those problems? And so that's really what the exploration medical capability element is all about. I have the link to the video there for you, but I also have the link to XMC's website if you want to know more about XMC and what they do. It's the bottom web URL that's listed there. But in a nutshell, that's what XMC is tasked with, which you can imagine is, is a big task. And like Chris said, trying to figure out what to pack is a big task. And specifically what he said about, like, do we really need it? That's a really big task, right? But that is the crux of the question of whether or not it should be packed. Do we really need it? We've been spoiled for a long time with ISS because we can take more than we need and we can have it just in case. But when you're looking at trying to get the mass and volume all the way to the moon or all the way to Mars, you can really only take what you need. And so we're trying to figure out, well, what do we need? So that's my job with XMC. So, okay, next slide, please. All right, so sorry I'm showing you a chart on a Saturday. Oh, previous slide. There we go. Sorry I'm showing you, oh, that one, yep. Sorry I'm showing you, you're all good. Sorry I'm showing you a chart on a Saturday. That's brutal, I know. But I couldn't find any cool videos or anything for the HSRB. But the HSRB at NASA is what's called the Human System Risk Board, and it's under HRP, which is the Human Research Program. And this is the Human Research Roadmap, which I'm showing you here. And there is a link, again, to learn more about that. It's in-depth and interesting. You can really dive into this if you want to know a lot more. But essentially, NASA has to own the risk that they're asking their astronauts to take on, right? You know, because their astronauts are their employees. They're employees of the government, and they're saying, you know, we're asking you to go into space. So NASA needs to be able to tell those astronauts, what are the risks associated with your job, right? Just like any other job here terrestrially on Earth. You know, if I was, I don't know, like a electrician working on high wires or whatever, I would know ahead of time what those risks of my doing my job are. And so NASA needs to be able to tell their crew members what those risks are as well, but also try to mitigate them as much as possible to drive that risk down as low as possible, because why submit your employees to unnecessary risk, right? So essentially what the HSRB does, the Human System Risk Board, they're the like risk owners for NASA. So they have about 30 different risks that they have identified that they track, and they have assigned are like a research lead and an operational lead to each of those risks. And the research lead and the operational lead and an epidemiologist are constantly keeping track of what's the latest evidence about this, what's the latest literature, what are the newest developments, how can we make this risk lower, like, or is this risk going up? And if it is, what do we need to do to keep our crew members safe? And you actually are like in charge of it, and then you actually go and present that to the HSRB board at regular intervals to make sure that everyone at the agency is still aware of, like, these are the risks, this is the data, this is what we're doing about it, this is how we're keeping our crew members safe, and you know, these are our next steps going forward. So I am the operational bone risk custodian, which means that I'm the flight doc in charge of the risk, fracture, bone loss, and osteoporosis risks, and things like that. And so it's a big job, but you know, it's a really important job because we want to maintain the bone health of our crew members at the very best level that we possibly can. And so the why on this, if people aren't aware, is when you go into space, you lose bone. And so it's like 1% per month if you don't do something about it, and can be, you know, even higher than that. We, with most of our crew members, have it down to about 1% per month with some of the countermeasures that we have. So like the exercise countermeasures in spaceflight. But, you know, before we had those countermeasures for like Russian Mir space station and shuttle and things like that, we had people coming back with like, you know, 20% bone loss in some of their bones. And so we do DEXA scans for bone mineral density, but we're always looking at what the best way of monitoring is and what the best way of mitigating is, and how we can best keep the health of the bones of our crew members, you know, as close to what they were before they left for spaceflight as possible. So that's pretty much my job with the HSRB. So next slide. It's another video. Oh, no, it's not. Just kidding. It's MSK. That's the next slide. So since I'm a sports medicine doctor, I also work in musculoskeletal medicine and rehabilitation at NASA. And so with like consultations, although I've been working remotely with coronavirus because Johnson Space Center is closed unless you're like essential, assigned to a mission at the time. So I haven't done a whole lot of consultation work. But I am working using my public health background from my aerospace medicine residency. I am working with the musculoskeletal and rehabilitation group to try to design new surveillance, right? New things that we can do similar to the bone stuff that I was talking about to make sure that the musculoskeletal system is not taking too much of a hit in space, right? The people aren't having unnecessary pain. The people aren't having unnecessary changes. So just like bone, just like you lose bone in space, you lose muscle in space too. It's kind of the if you don't use it, you lose it situation. So that's the same reason that we have exercise countermeasures. So this is a picture of somebody on the T2 treadmill in space, and you can see that he's bungee corded down because obviously you would just float off of it when you run otherwise. But we have 3 devices on the International Space Station right now. We have the T2 treadmill, we have the ARED, which is the Advanced Resistive Exercise Device, and we have the CVIS, which is like a exercise bike. But they take up a lot of room. I mean, look at how big this treadmill is. The ARED is huge. The exercise bike is about the size of an exercise bike. Again, we're not going to be able to fit all 3 of those in an Orion capsule for exploration missions. So there's a lot of work underway at NASA developing the next greatest thing for Orion. But the goal is to try to get, something that will give us the cardiovascular workout that the treadmill and the bike give us, but also the resistive exercise that ARED gives us. So ARED can give you 600 pounds of resistive exercise, which is amazing. And it works on a vacuum pressure system. But they can do like squats and deadlifts and pulls and all sorts of things with ARED, but it's massive, right? So we are now, not me personally, but other people at NASA are working on what we're going to use for exploration spaceflight. And they were essentially tasked with like, okay, it needs to be the size of like, I don't know, a basketball or a beach ball, but it needs to do everything that those other 3 devices can do, which is hard, right? This is why literally like rocket scientists and brilliant people work at NASA. So they've been working on that, but on the musculoskeletal side of things, more what I do is making sure that we're keeping our crew members as healthy as we can. So we're working on different surveillance protocols to try to make sure that we're monitoring effectively pre-flight, in-flight, post-flight to see any changes that are happening and to effectively intervene to keep our crew members as healthy as possible. And then when they're on the ground, if they have any issues, we see them in clinic to take care of those musculoskeletal problems. So that's my job with musculoskeletal medicine and rehabilitation. Next slide. Now this one's going to be a video. So this is just, I'm going to tell you guys about, no, you're good. You can go for it. I'll tell you about it afterwards.
1968 and 1972, America launched 9 human missions to the moon, 6 of which successfully touched down, allowing 12 men to walk on the lunar surface. NASA's next chapter of lunar exploration, called Artemis, has the task of not just going to the moon to create a long-term human presence on and around it, but also to prepare for ever more complex human missions to Mars. In short, everything we must be able to do here, we must first do here. So, what will an Artemis mission look like? Everything is designed and tested with our most important element in mind, the astronauts. This is their deep space, human-rated spacecraft called Orion, built in 3 parts. The crew module, where up to 4 astronauts will live and work throughout the flight. The service module, with life support systems for the crew and its own engine and fuel reserves. And a launch abort system, with engines capable of pulling the crew module to safety during launch should anything go wrong. To accomplish the task of launching our crew and heavy payloads, NASA is building the Space Launch System, comprising of a cargo hold, an exploration upper stage, a massive core stage, and 2 extended solid rocket boosters. Altogether, this is the world's most powerful rocket, and it exceeds the legendary Saturn V of the Apollo era in numerous ways. Sitting on the launch pad, the entire rocket, fully fueled, weighs just over 6 million pounds, 5.2 million of which is just the fuel. Once ignited, there is no stopping what comes next. All 4 RS-25 engines and the 2 solid rocket boosters come to life, thundering our crew upwards. 2 minutes after ignition, the solid rocket boosters are spent and released. 8 minutes after launch, the core stage is depleted and separated. The upper stage fires briefly, placing Orion into a parking orbit around the Earth. Here, the crew reconfigure the spacecraft and check systems to confirm everything is ready for deep space travel. With a go from mission control, the crew reignite the exploration upper stage engines to leave Earth entirely. The exact timing of this maneuver is critical to reach a speed that can escape Earth's gravitational pull, but also put Orion on a course that will intersect the moon days later. Once this burn is complete, the upper stage of the SLS is jettisoned and the crew aboard Orion coast for several days toward all that awaits them at the moon. Approaching the moon, we see the fundamental differences between Artemis and Apollo. Instead of requiring Orion to serve as an expendable lunar command module or to carry a constrained lunar lander, the Artemis missions will take advantage of a different approach, pre-staging. Everything needed for lunar missions will be positioned in advance by commercial and international partners. This includes rovers, science experiments, and human-rated systems on the surface. But it also includes a dedicated lunar station in orbit around the moon called Gateway. Here at this station, we can pre-stage a robust lunar lander and establish a strong communications relay. Designed with open standards, the Gateway can be expanded as new missions and partnerships develop, allowing multiple human missions on the moon at the same time and enabling ongoing science to be conducted even between human missions. The Gateway is also capable of adjusting its orbit to allow access to every part of the moon, something the Apollo missions could not do. But the real key in this approach is placing Gateway in a unique halo orbit to perfect the maneuvers needed for Mars missions. And with the growing list of commercial and international opportunities, Gateway is the ideal hub between Earth and all that lies beyond. Returning to our crew as they approach Gateway, the Orion must match the elliptical orbit of the station in order to successfully dock. Once on board, pre-selected crew members transfer to the lunar lander, while those assigned to Gateway remain on station. The lunar lander system itself is built for 3 unique steps: descending from the halo orbit of Gateway down to a low lunar orbit, descending from low lunar orbit to the surface, and once the lunar mission is complete, launching from the surface of the moon and ascending all the way back to the orbiting Gateway. Once back aboard the Orion spacecraft and undocked from Gateway, the crew fire their engine once to break out of the halo orbit and once again to sling the spacecraft around the moon, placing it on a multi-day trajectory back towards Earth. As they near the end of this journey, the service module is released, and the crew module is oriented heat shield first. Entering Earth's atmosphere at 25,000 miles per hour, the friction of air slows Orion considerably, while also subjecting it to temperatures of 5,000 degrees. With the Orion now at just 300 miles per hour, a series of parachutes uniquely tested and produced for this moment deploy, decelerating the craft to just 20 miles per hour for splashdown. With each successful mission, Artemis ushers in the next wave of men and women to explore our moon and prove that together we are ready to go beyond.
Cool. So I showed that video because Artemis is a lot more complicated than the Apollo missions to the moon, as they pointed out. And I don't think a lot of people outside of NASA have a good grasp for the fact that we are putting a small space station around in orbit around the moon, right? So that's what the Gateway is. So so it's important that you kind of have a little bit of an understanding of how that mission architecture looks for me to explain the other part of my job with MedOps. So I'm the lead on something called the Artemis Health Measures Project. And the Artemis Health Measures Project is trying to, again, similar to what XMC is doing, but from a different approach, trying to get at what do we need to take, right? Like, that's like the $1 million question, right? What do we need to take? Because we really don't want to be there without something that we need, but we don't want to take extra. It's already 6 million pounds for SLS, right? Like every pound costs a lot of money. So what the Artemis Health Measures Project is doing is trying to reach across all of those different phases, right? So SLS has Orion, right? But then there's Gateway, but then there's also the lunar lander, but then there's also going to be like a lunar habitat. And all of these different places are going to have different capabilities and different med kits and all these different things. But like, what do we need in general for Artemis, right? Like, what do we need to monitor? Not specifically what we need to pack, but what do we need to monitor on our crew members, right? From a medical standpoint, to know what we need to know to go to Mars. That's the question for Artemis Health Measures Project. Like, we have this amazing opportunity to use the moon, not only for a staging point to learn, like the video said, everything we need to know to get to Mars, like from a, from a like vehicle and landing and operational standpoint, but also from a monitoring standpoint, right? Like what is it that really is a high priority for us to monitor? Is it someone's heart rate? Is it their blood pressure? Is it their vestibular system? Is it, their urine output? Who knows, right? Like, what is it? We have some ideas based on the International Space Station, but again, we've been really spoiled, right? With ISS that we could do a lot of stuff that we probably don't need. And what do we really need? And what is really going to help us really buy down that risk going towards Mars? So the Artemis Health Measures Project is sort of like the culmination of all the other things I do at NASA, because it's looking at those trades, just like my XMC job's looking at, but it's also looking at the risk, like my HSRB job is looking at, right? And like, bottom line is, what's the best thing for us to monitor to try to buy that risk down going forward for Mars mission? And that's a very controversial topic at NASA. And a lot of different people are working on their own piece of the pie, right? They're working on their Orion piece or their Gateway piece or their lunar habitat piece or their lunar lander piece or whatever their piece is. But we really need to look at it from a bigger picture. And so we're trying to look at it from the bigger picture. And so we are getting input like across the agency on monitoring parameters, and we're trying to come up with a prioritization scheme for how best to prioritize these monitoring parameters for these Artemis missions. So that, in a nutshell, is my job with the Artemis Health Measures Project. Next slide, whenever you're ready. I think that's
Between 1968.
I think that's all the jobs that I have at NASA. I hope I'm not leaving anything out. But yeah, it's really great. I love my job. I love working for UTMB.
And 1970.
It's been fantastic. I'm really pleased with how my career has turned out. I would highly recommend Aerospace Medicine to anybody who's interested in it. NASA's not the only show in town. There's commercial space. There's the FAA. There's the aviation industry. This is a great time to be going into aerospace medicine. So I would highly encourage all of you to keep pursuing that dream. I think my last slide's just questions. Yep. So I will take any questions.
Hey, Amy, I was just curious, what's like your favorite thing you get to do as a flight surgeon?
That's a good question. Oh, there's so many awesome things. There's so many awesome things that I get to do. One thing that I should tell you guys, sorry that I didn't tell you up front, I'm kind of atypical for like a medical operations flight surgeon. So, I think when people think about like the standard med ops job, they think about like the doctor that gets assigned to the crew member who gets assigned to space flight, and they're like seeing them leading up to the mission, and then they're going to their launch, and they're there when they land, and they're in mission control while they're in on the International Space Station. That is a big component of the medical operations job. I'm not doing those things for the medical operations job because for family reasons, I actually need to be remote. So I'm not located in Texas. So you can't do those things if you don't live in Texas. So I'm not doing that component of the job, but that is certainly a part of the medical operations job, and that's a big part of the medical operations job at NASA, is being assigned to crew members, taking care of them pre-flight, taking care of them post-flight, taking care of them in flight, being in mission control, doing all of those things. I'm not doing those things at this stage in my career. I hope to be doing them later, but just for some family reasons, we just needed to be out of state for a little while. So I'm not in Texas. But yeah, I would say that's a really hard question to narrow down because there's just so many awesome things that we get to do. Let me take another question. I'm going to think about that in the back of my head. It's really hard to narrow it down to one. It's really hard to narrow it down. It's really, really hard to narrow it down to one. So let me take another question. I'm going to keep thinking about it. I'm going to try really hard to take it to one for you by the end of the questions.
Thanks so much, Amy. I have one sent in by Sophia that she asked me to read for her, or sorry, Sophie, that she asked me to read for her. So she says, do you ever work with a team of physicians? And is there a wide range of specialties that you see among those physicians?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yes, absolutely. We work with teams of physicians all the time. So in medical operations, there's quite a few different physicians working there. I don't actually know the exact number in med ops, but it's above 20. It's probably less than 40, but above 20. But all sorts of different physicians work there. So most of us are aerospace medicine board certified, but original specialties, there's emergency medicine, there's family medicine, there's internal medicine, there's obstetrics and gynecology. There's, I don't know if there's any surgeons, but I have trained with surgeons previously who are aerospace medicine docs. There's like hyperbarics and undersea medicine. There's it's physical medicine and rehabilitation, sports medicine. It is a broad swath of different physicians, which is really great because then you get all of these different inputs from people, and you might not be the expert in something. Nobody can be the expert in everything, and so it really is this awesome collaboration, which is great. Then with XMC, there's probably about 6 docs on the XMC team, and we have family medicine, sports medicine, physical medicine, rehabilitation, emergency medicine, wilderness medicine, pathology, obstetrics and gynecology, maternal fetal medicine, not board certified in ENT, but we have somebody who trained in ENT for a couple of years before they switched to a different specialty. So yeah, I mean, it's like lots and lots of different specialties. And it's really a privilege to work with all of these people who all previously had these different specialties. Oh, and then there's also a lot of military too, right? So there's a lot of people who have had military medicine experience, which is incredible as well. So yeah, we work across these teams. In XMC, I work with all we work together. Like we are assigned to projects like together, and we are working on these projects together. So yeah, I'm on the phone and on calls with my XMC docs like multiple times a day, if not definitely multiple times a week. And then the MedOps docs, yeah, we all work together as well. It kind of depends on the project that you're on or the assignment that you're on at the time. But yeah, once a week, all of the medical operations docs get together for, they call it the medical operation group meeting. And we meet and like have a powwow about like what's going on across operations at NASA right now, and what's happening in this next week, and what just happened, and what do we need to talk about. So yeah, we work together all the time and collaborate all the time, and that's a really enjoyable part of the job.
Thank you. And quick disclaimer, I apologize, I accidentally stole Jamil's question. Sophie's question is, do you misdirect sort of the normal patient contact you would get in like the family medicine or sports medicine settings?
So that's a really great question, and I'm really glad that somebody brought that up, because one thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is that aerospace medicine is way less hands-on than your normal, like clinical job. So if I was working in family medicine, I'd be seeing patients every 15 minutes, somewhere probably around like 30 or so a day. And that is not the case with aerospace medicine. So even if you are really clinical, right? Like say you're working in the the flight medicine clinic at NASA, right? There's not that many astronauts, right? And they're pretty healthy people. So you still just clinically do not see that many patients. So most aerospace medicine doctors, whether it's with NASA or commercial entities or whatever, most aerospace medicine doctors try to work in their primary specialty on the side, which is hard. That's a tough balance, right? Because we're all full-time in whatever job we're already in. And then we're trying to work on the side in whatever job we also want to work in, right? So that's really easy, I would say, for people in like emergency medicine, because emergency rooms are open all hours of the day. It's a little bit harder with things like family medicine and things like that, but we all make it work. And then some of the flight docs are also military. And so you can't be full-time active duty and full-time your job. You can get deployed temporarily on active duty. So, but most of the people that work as flight docs who are also military are like reserve or guard or something like that. And so if you're in the reserves or the guard, you work like a weekend a month and a couple weeks a year, and then you can get deployed. And if they get deployed, then they go do their deployment and NASA waits for them. But that would be clinical opportunities as well. So, but I'm really glad you asked that question, because that's something that I think a lot of people don't realize. The clinical volume is way less. So yeah, I do. I miss seeing patients. But I try to balance that in my life as best as possible and do some clinical stuff on the side. Realistically speaking, with a full-time job, and I also have a family and a toddler. It's hard. It's a hard balance to meet. So it's like a clinical day a week max. Otherwise, there's just not enough time in the day, well, in the week, in the world. So good question, though.
I kind of wanted to piggyback off of that question. This is Linda, Amy,
Yeah, go
if
ahead.
you remember me.
Oh, hey, Linda, how are ya?
Good. I know one of the people that you trained with was emergency medicine critical care. And I was curious, I don't know if you know anything about her experience, about keeping up her skills on the critical care side. It's easy, I guess, to possibly pick up shifts in an emergency room, but do you know anything about that, or anybody else who may have been in a similar situation as her, where it is definitely more of a intense situation that you're not really going to get those kinds of experiences necessarily just in an emergency room?
Yeah, no, that's a fair question. I don't know how she's keeping up her critical care stuff. I don't know if she has like ICU shifts that she works, or if she's just doing emergency medicine. I can tell you that she's Air National Guard, and she's trying to work with a CCAT team, which is a critical care air transport team. So her work with the Air National Guard would be critical care. I don't know where she is in all of that, though. We haven't talked about that in a little while.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
And then we have an additional question from Claire. What advice do you have for students who wish to pursue a career in aerospace medicine?
Yeah, good question. So the best piece of advice I could give you is what I said early on. Do something that you love, right? For multiple reasons, right? First of all, because you're going to enjoy it. And a career in medicine is really hard. Any kind of medicine that you go into. And I think you kind of want to know as best you can what you're getting yourself into. So if you're a student and you haven't, like, I don't know where you are in your student life, but if you're like a undergrad student and you're thinking about there's lots of junctures, right? Like undergrad, okay, medicine, yes or no, right? And then after medicine, specialty, yes or no. And then after specialty, another specialty, yes or no, right? So there's all these like sort of junctures where you make these decisions. So as an undergrad student, I would say try to have a bit of an awareness about what you're getting yourself into, right? As much as you can. So a really great way to do that is to volunteer. So when I was an undergrad, I volunteered in a couple of emergency departments, and I think I volunteered in an office, and I just tried to get myself as much exposure as possible. And my kind of take home from that experience was, wow, there's a lot of really bad stuff that happens in medicine, right? Like really truly horrible stuff, right? Like people abusing their kids, like people hurting other people, like, there's bad stuff, people dying. The first time you ever see someone die, that's not an easy thing to do, right? But that's what doctors are asked to do, right? And depending on the kind of doctor you are, maybe some more than others, but it's not easy to go try to resuscitate someone who's dying and do CPR and code them and it's a tough job. And there are days that you come home from residency feeling really beaten down. But I really felt like, having given myself some exposure prior to making the decision, medicine or no, I really felt like there's a lot of bad stuff that happens in medicine. But on the flip side, I had seen a lot of the really good stuff too, right? A lot of babies being born, a lot of people being cured from things that they had been struggling with for years, a lot of families being really well cared for, a lot of milestones, a lot of cancer being treated, a lot of amazing things, right? And at the end of the day, my personal decision was, I feel like that good outweighs that bad. So I'm willing to take that bad on because the good is worth it, right? But it is a demanding job, medicine in general, right? There's a lot of burnout in medicine. It's a demanding physically and emotionally and time job. So you need to kind of have a realistic idea about that going in. It's not all just like sunshine and rainbows and Skittles, right? There's bad stuff too. So that's sort of the first juncture, right? Yes or no? Am I willing to accept this? Then it's okay, do what you love, find what you're passionate about and chase it, right? But also, I always felt like it was really important to have a backup plan, because maybe everyone wants to be an aerospace medicine doctor, but it's a really small field, right? Realistically speaking, not everyone's going to be an aerospace medicine doctor. Not everyone's going to be a family medicine doctor. Not everyone's going to be a sports medicine doctor or a surgeon or an ENT or whatever the case may be. It is possible, and I'm sorry if it happens, but it is possible that you might have that goal and you might fall short, right? So know what you're going to do if you fall short. Have a backup plan in mind, but chase what you love, right? Don't ever do something because you think it's going to be what other people want you to do, because you think that it's going to be what's going to look best on your CV or your resume, because you think it's going to get you into that residency program, because no, that's the wrong answer. Do what you love, be passionate about what you love, and that will come through, right? I interviewed for my medical school, like I was on their admission committee. I interviewed for my residency. I interviewed for my fellowships. If you are passionate about what you do and you love what you do, that will come through. And if you aren't, and you're just doing it because you thought it was a good idea because somebody told you should, or you thought it might get you to your end point, that will come through as well. So do what you love because it's the best way to get to where you want to be, but also do what you love because if those far-reaching goals don't end up happening, then you're doing something that you love, right? Anyway, right? If I didn't become an aerospace medicine, if I didn't become a sports medicine doctor, I love being a family medicine doc. That would have been enough for me. If I didn't become an aerospace medicine doc, I love being a family medicine and sports medicine doc, and that would be enough for me. So do what you love and do what you're passionate about, and do what you could see yourself doing for your lifetime. Don't ever pick a residency just because you think it's going to get you somewhere, and don't ever move somewhere because you think it. When I was applying for my residency, my brother, who's a lawyer, right, nothing to do with medicine, I was applying for residency, and I was like looking at all these like great programs, right? And he said, "Do you really want to live there? Do you want to live in that city? That city's kind of dodgy, it might be a great program, but you want to live there?" I was like, "No, not really, but it's such a great program." And he was like, "Why would you apply for somewhere you don't want to live? Like live where you want to live, And I thought, wow, that's really profound. But nobody had really told me that. I hadn't thought about that. I hadn't, so I was just looking at like the specs for the schools, right? Be where you want to be, live where you want to live, do what you're passionate about, because life has to happen on the side of work as well, right? And you want to be happy. So do what makes you happy. So that's my biggest advice.
I had a quick question. Let's see. So would it be helpful, or would you say that it's helpful to have a familiarity or background in, the world of aviation before heading into aerospace med?
Yeah. So yes, I think in short, yeah, any exposure that you can give yourself to what you might be experiencing in your chosen field is going to be helpful, right? So kind of like I said, if you're an undergrad and you want to go to medical school, maybe do a little bit of shadowing in medicine so that you have a little bit of a realistic take of what that's going to be like. Any exposure you could get to aviation would be helpful. I was lucky. I grew up in an aviation family. My dad was a fighter pilot, and then he flew for United Airlines for 37 years. I got my pilot's license when I was 17. So I have flown personally, and I got the aviation bug early. And I was like, I love this. This is amazing. What? I could be a doctor and take care of pilots? That's so great. Like I knew that was where it was at. For me, personal decision for everyone. But yeah, any exposure that you can get would be useful exposure, whether that's, just like learning about it. Because the aviation industry is expensive, right? I'm not telling everyone on this call they should go out and try to get their pilot's license. That is not the take home from this presentation. But you could learn more about it, right? You could read more about it. You could attend things like this. AMSRO, the Aerospace Medicine Student and Resident Organization, has tons of resources. If you join their group, you have to be part of ASMA, which is the Aerospace Medical Association, to be part of AMSRO. But if you join AMSRO, I swear you could be like a full-time AMSRO viewer, right? I'm on their Slack group and I get like 6 or 7 invitations to meetings a week. And it's like, wow, look at all these amazing opportunities. So you could just, expose yourself to it and learn more about it. And all that stuff is not as expensive as, say, getting your pilot's license. But, if you have the opportunity to go spend time at a local airport, even if it's not in a plane, maybe it's just, sitting down where the people who run the tarmac are and like learning stuff from them. Anything you can do to sort of get yourself some exposure to the aviation world, I think is useful because it's a different world. And knowing a little bit about it, I think, is really useful.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
We have one more question from Sophie. She was saying that for the impact tool, does NASA cooperate with any commercial medical diagnostic software companies that are out there, or are they doing it all on their own from scratch?
That is an excellent question. Man, you guys have good questions. So XMC actually has a bunch of commercial partners who, I don't know all the specifics on how it works, but they put in bids, basically, right? Like NASA will say, okay, we want to build whatever, right? This thing. Sorry, I'm not being very eloquent with my answer here. Say maybe NASA says we want a, remotely guided diagnostic something or other, right? We want something that the crew members can use in space flight without support from the ground to help diagnose whatever, right? And that needs to be some sort of software, and maybe it uses, like ultrasound, or maybe it uses other technology or something like that. But this is what we want. NASA will say, this is what we want. And then a bunch of commercial agents will bid basically to try to be the winner, essentially, to build that. And it's really interesting. That's one of the an interesting part of what I do at XMC. We get, as clinicians on the XMC team, we get invited to their presentations. So they'll come to NASA and they'll say, okay, this is what we think. This is our idea. This is our software. This is our device or whatever. And they're really interesting presentations, which I can't tell you much about because they're all proprietary stuff. But they come and they show us these incredible things that they're building. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is so cool. What a great idea. Wow. It's really great. And then poor someone else, not me at NASA, has to make the decision of which one of those is going to win the bid, right? And they have different phases. So they'll go through a phase 1. And I think they get, obviously they get paid. So NASA will pay them to do the work. But they'll make it through phase 1, and then they'll come back and do phase 2, and NASA will be like, okay, now we want you to do X, Y, and Z or whatever. And so, yeah, they work with a lot of commercial partners who basically who bid for the job to build these technologies. And it is really interesting. There's some amazing stuff. And every time someone presents, I think, wow, this would be so great in medical school, like, because most of it is like remote stuff, right? So it's like autonomous, like learning and things like that for the crew members to be able to take care of themselves should something happen in spaceflight. And I always see it and I think, man, if you could have that in medical school, you could just be like learning all of these skills and all of this stuff. And so I always say that. I say, well, like if it doesn't work out with NASA, you should definitely bid this to medical schools. And they're like, yeah, okay, whatever. So, but yeah, they definitely work with commercial people.
Thank you so much, Amy. Are there any last questions? I don't see anything else in the chat. Does anybody else have a question for Dr. Kreykes?
I do actually.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. No, that's okay. Go ahead.
All right, I was curious. I'm doing some research. I'm not sure if you've met Dr. Lisa Deutsch. She's at the oh, you have.
She's awesome. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, great. Well, I'm working with her on some research about hyperbaric oxygen therapy, and I was curious. Since it sounds like bone density is definitely well within your wheelhouse. What are your thoughts on hyperbaric oxygen therapy as a potential technology that might help or not and be applicable to long duration space flight and mitigating bone loss?
So that's a very interesting question that recently someone else brought up to me, and they were like, what do you think about this? And I was like, well, I don't really think the evidence is there yet. But that being said, hyperbaric oxygen therapy is amazing, and it can do amazing things and fix amazing problems. It wouldn't ever be a realistic in-flight treatment because, like chambers are really heavy. And if you wanted to use something like the suit to pressurize the suits that much, you would be doing something called decommissioning them. So they wouldn't be like safe to use for EVAs anymore. So I don't think it would ever be a realistic in-flight treatment. But I think that if the evidence, really starts to pan out that it's worthwhile post-flight, yeah, why not? I mean, we got a chamber at NASA, we might as well use it. It's a pretty low risk treatment. I mean, there's risks of pulmonary oxygen toxicity and CNS oxygen toxicity. But as long as you treat them appropriately, that risk is pretty low. So yeah, I mean, I think that if the evidence really pans out that that's going to be useful, that would be great, because the real question mark in everyone's mind is what's going to happen on these long duration missions, right? I told you guys that we're doing pretty good with ISS, but when we go on long duration missions, we're outside of low Earth orbit, which means we're exposed to more radiation, which we think probably has resorptive effects on bone based on what we know. And we're kind of losing our proven exercises and going for something different that we don't really have the robust amount of data that we've had for these previous exercises. And so, yeah, I mean, if you go to Mars and back, and this takes like several years, what are your bones going to look like when you get back? And if hyperbaric oxygen therapy could help that, I would be all for it.
Awesome.
And Lisa's awesome. I'm glad you're working with her. She is a very brilliant person and just an awesome person in general. So you've got a good mentor there.
Oh my gosh, she's the greatest. I totally agree.
She's amazing. I really like Lisa a lot. So I owe the first questioner an answer. And I would say, and this is going to sound like a super cheeseball answer, so I'm sorry that it's cheesy, but I would say it's when you know that you've made a difference, right? So there's a lot of spaceflight's complicated, and the problems associated with spaceflight are really complicated. And so sometimes it's really easy to sort of lose the forest for the trees and get lost in the minutia. And you're like so focused on your project that you are like really down and dirty in the details. But then there are like these aha moments when you're working where you're like, wow, what I just did is really going to make a difference for my crew members, right? So I can't there's lots of like proprietary information at NASA, so I can't always tell you too much. But I just had a meeting this week for something that we've been working on that my mentor that I'm working with has been working on for over a decade. And then I've been working with him on for, well, I don't know, 2.5 years or so. And we took a proposal that we've been working on for some surveillance of crew members to the board that says yes or no. And they said, yeah, we really think that's a good idea because we really think that's going to help us take better care of our crew. And that was kind of a huge moment, you know, because you know that you're making a huge difference for crew members. And that's going to make a big difference for everyone going forward. And so moments like that can be like a big result of a meeting or seeing a crew member and treating them and having a successful outcome to your treatment, especially for a lot of things in musculoskeletal medicine are like really niggly, right? You know, like you can have like this like non-specific muscular whatever that's just been nagging at you forever. And then finally you get it right? And you figure out what the perfect combination for that person is for them to have their lifestyle that they want, to do the missions that they need to do, and to, not be in pain and not have serious limitations from your treatment, right? And that's a great day, right? Because you've made a difference for that crew member. So I would say that's my favorite thing about being a flight surgeon is when you have those moments where you know that you've made that difference. And sometimes they get lost because you've got lots of details and lots of workload, but those aha moments are the best part of the job.
Thanks, Amy. I appreciate it. It was honestly already a good answer that you weren't even sure.
There's a lot of really amazing things. And if you're, physically in Houston and physically on campus at JSC, there's a lot of like when I was in residency, I got to scuba dive in the NBL, right? Like that was one of the greatest days of my life. Like that's amazing. So there's amazing things that you get to do. I'm remote now, so I don't get to do quite as many of those like amazing like activities. But I've done like the T-38 water training survival in the NBL as well, where they like drop you in the pool and they drag you across with your parachute. That's pretty cool. Like there's some pretty cool things that you get to do. So crew return is really awesome. So like I've not personally like flown to Kazakhstan to get crew, but being there like when the crew returns to like meet them at the plane, that's pretty amazing. There's just a lot of amazing things. So not being able to narrow it down, I guess, is a good sign. But I'd say the best thing is when you've really had an impact in either an individual crew member's life or like a public health standpoint, all crew members going forward based on something that you've done. That's why you do it. That's what the job's for, is to make that difference.
Thank you so much, Amy. This has been an amazing talk. I apologize to the people who waited in the waiting room for a few extra minutes. It took me even personally figuring out Zoom. I've been fortunate enough to be essential and not Zoom very much, but then not know how to work Zoom. So I appreciate the extra time that you guys gave us to get set up. Amy, I really appreciate that you took the time out of your Saturday morning to come talk to us. It's been an amazing talk. I might be your biggest fan now because my capstone project is right in your wheelhouse. As you were talking, I was like, oh my God. But I really appreciate you taking the time to come kind of share a really interesting perspective that we haven't had yet for more in depth on the residency side for aerospace medicine, and then also the NASA flight surgeon side as well.
No problem. It's my pleasure to be here, you guys. And for those of you who waited in the waiting room, Melissa's being very humble. That was 90% my problem, not hers. So I'm really sorry about that. We got there in the end, though.
We made it. I'm really happy that we did. Thank you so much for your time. If anybody has additional questions for Amy later on, you're welcome to reach out to WAM via our email and we can help to reach out to her. And of course, with anything else that you guys need help with as well. Other than that, I don't have any big WAM news or updates this meeting. A lot of people right now are at the point in year where they're taking their step or graduating. So there'll probably be more news.
Congratulations for all of that, you guys. That's awesome.
Yes, I am so excited to graduate in 3 weeks. But for everybody else that's here, congratulations for where you are in your careers. I'm not sure if you guys are college, med school, beyond med school, but I appreciate you guys taking the time to come out and support WAM. Any other big things at the moment?
Thank you all. That was seriously such an awesome presentation and everything. It's fantastic.
Oh, well, you guys flatter me. I'm happy to do it. There were a lot of people who did stuff like this that really inspired me when I was in you guys' position. And so paying it forward is something that's really high on my list because, you don't get to where you do in your career without learning more about what you want to do and without having those people who help inspire you and guide you. So good luck to you all. Hope you all keep chasing those dreams.
Thank you very much. Thank you guys for joining us. Feel free to reach out to us if you need anything. Have a good rest of your weekend.
Bye. Thank you again.